attends his New York City rally as he campaigns in battleground Pennsylvania. And Vice President Kamala Harris prepares to deliver her closing argument in Washington, at the same spot where her opponent whipped up his supporters ahead of the attacks on the Capitol January 6, 2021.
I'm running on a plan to save America. We're going to save America. We have no choice.
My presidency is not going to be a continuation of the Biden presidency. I bring to my perspective my own ideas, my own experiences.
For the rest of the week, it's just going to be rally after rally, these two candidates crisscrossing the battleground states.
We're 7 days away, 45 states in D.C. offering early voting right now.
If any of the ugliness returns that we experienced in 2020, everyone will be ready.
I'm far from broken. I've been empowered by my 4 months at Danbury Federal Prison.
Israel's parliament voted yesterday to bar the United Nations agency that helps Palestinian refugees from operating inside Israel.
We are deeply troubled by this legislation. It could shutter UNRWA operations in the West Bank, in Gaza, in East Jerusalem.
Hello, thank you for joining us. We begin our report exactly 1 week from Election Day, and already more than 51 million people have voted early in person and by mail. Polls show the race between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump is razor thin, and the candidates are taking every opportunity to turn out voters. On Tuesday, the vice president is set to deliver what the campaign is calling her closing argument speech at the Ellipse in Washington. This location is no coincidence. It's the same place where former President Donald Trump spoke on January 6, 2021, telling his supporters the 2020 election was stolen as Congress was working to certify the results. Ahead of tonight's remarks, Harris sat down for an interview with CBS News Philadelphia and spoke about the contrast she sees between herself and her opponent.
And we need a president of the United States who, moving forward, as we turn the page on the last decade, frankly, during the Trump era that has been about trying to divide Americans and have people point their fingers at each other, that we have a president who leads knowing that the vast majority of Americans have more in common than what separates us.
Meanwhile, the Republican nominee is holding his fair share of counter-programming Tuesday. That includes a rally in Allentown, Pennsylvania, and the crucial battleground state worth 19 electoral college votes. Earlier, Trump spoke at his Mar-a-Lago estate in Palm Beach, Florida, where he criticized Harris on immigration and crime.
Very simply, Kamala Harris is not fit to be your president. Her message has been a message of hate and division, and my message is about saving our economy, securing our border, bringing together the greatest and broadest coalition in American history.
Let's bring in CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent Robert Costa. Bob, thanks for being with us this evening. Our Nancy Cordes spoke with a Harris campaign advisor ahead of tonight's speech. Let's listen.
Having the White House behind Kamala Harris tonight is an important moment for her to say one of us, either her or Donald Trump, is going to be sitting in that building and to talk about the stakes and what that's going to mean for the American people on the economy, on health care, and on leadership.
Bob, the decision to speak at the Ellipse will, of course, remind people of January 6th and attacks on democracy. Will that distract from some key issues like the economy and immigration?
Great to be with you. For Vice President Harris, this is a crucial moment in the campaign to define the stakes for voters in the final week of the election and not distracting in any way from her focus on the economy and other issues when it comes to policy, but trying to make it about character, about high stakes for the country, its identity, its future. This will be a test of whether she can hit some of these bigger themes, a more fundamental message to reach out to those voters who might still be on the fence in places like the Philadelphia suburbs, the Atlanta suburbs, the suburbs of Milwaukee, where there might be a traditional Republican voter out there who has concerns about Trump. A reminder about January 6th, the Harris campaign hopes, at least, could tip them over the edge toward the Democrats.
Well, you asked Donald Trump Jr. on Sunday about the Harris speech at the Ellipse. Let's hear what he said.
They're still speaking about January 6th. I think that's a fundamental problem. I don't think I've spoken to a single American who even remotely cares. Those are desperate acts. Those are desperate measures.
They're publicly saying this. Are they also saying it privately to you, or does this subject worry them?
It does not worry the Trump campaign. Donald Trump Jr.'s message is indicative of a broader conclusion inside of Trump's inner circle. They believe that January 6th remains a motivator for motivated Democrats. It's something that gets out the Democratic base. And they believe that Vice President Harris's speech tonight is about making sure Democrats turn out. And that sense of alarm they felt about President Trump when he was in the White House in 2017, 2018, 2019, and 2020 is once again seared into their own collective memory.
We've also seen continued fallout from a comedian's offensive remark about Puerto Rico at Trump's rally in New York City that you were at. How is the Harris campaign trying to use this to their advantage?
They are shining a spotlight on the comments and dismissing the Trump campaign's attempt to create some distance between the candidate and the speaker on stage at Madison Square Garden. But for the Trump movement, this is always a challenge. They have embraced a lot of controversial voices over the past near decade, and some of them were on stage in the closing stretch of this campaign at Madison Square Garden. And Democrats believe if some low-propensity voters are watching all of this unfold on stage, that they could associate Trump with these speakers, even if Trump believes there's a nuance there and he's not directly linked to them in any way.
Is the Trump campaign worried about the backlash?
They're not worried, but they're certainly paying attention to it. I wouldn't say the campaign's worried, but some of my Republican sources on Capitol Hill are worried, who are in marginal districts that have Latino and especially Puerto Rican populations, people with roots in Puerto Rico. There's a belief that this isn't helpful. It's not going to exactly excite people to vote for Trump. But there's also a sense that many Latino voters like Trump. If they've come here legally, they might even like his message on immigration. I've seen that across the campaign trail in my reporting.
Robert Costa, thank you.
Thank you.
In 1 week, voting will be complete, but the 2024 election will not be over. Ballots will still need to be tallied, and in some cases, there may be required state recounts, which has happened at least 36 times since the year 2000, according to the nonpartisan group Fair Vote. Once a winner is declared, then comes the election certification on January 6th. CBS News congressional correspondent Scott McFarland joins me now on set. Scott, so good to see you. What are some of the reasons that results of a state election can be contested, and what happens when it is?
Yeah, this will happen at a state capitol through the process between Election Day and December 14th, when those electoral votes are certified. There's any number of issues, legally or with ballot perfections or ballot curing, that need to be solved. But a lot of this is supposed to be settled early in December. What was different about 2020, Lindsay, is so much of this, because of baseless conspiracy theories, bled into January 6th, when the certification happened at the congressional level. That stuff should have been disposed of a month earlier. All of this was infused by baseless claims, kind of expanded the timetable.
So from local officials who may try to deny certification to politicians who are already planting seeds of voter fraud, how high is the concern that January 6, 2025 will not go smoothly?
There are several different types of concerns. Let's start with the certification issues. There are these legal challenges planted in 3 battleground states, North Carolina, Michigan, and Pennsylvania, trying to challenge how the oversight of overseas ballots was conducted, trying to make it more rigid for somebody who lives in those states to vote from overseas. Judges threw all of them out, saying it was the 11th hour and could disenfranchise voters. Not going to work. But those could be footholds for election deniers to try to challenge results on November 6th, November 7th, all the way through January 6th. That's one concern. The other concern is what happens if there is some mechanization in the U.S. House to try to stop the certification again. What if it's a Republican Speaker of the House who's inclined to try to infuse those challenges with energy? What happens if the Senate also tries to challenge the results and do more than Congress is supposed to do and the Vice President is supposed to do, which is just to ministerially read the state's results and accept them? There's concerns, and I can tell you this from our reporting, Lindsay, House Democrats have been war rooming this on Capitol Hill, planning for contingencies of how to stop anybody from weaponizing those levers of government to block the certification of a duly held election.
You know, this is a very confusing topic for me, I think, because of all of the what ifs that could happen, this sort of brave new world that we could find ourselves in. What are the unknowns that could affect certification, from, as you mentioned, whomever the Speaker of the House might be, to the makeup of Congress itself?
Well, those who have some faith in the Constitution and the system say whoever wins this election is going to get certified when all is said and done. But lots of things can change the level of messiness between here and there. Who's going to control Congress? That's as much a toss-up as the presidential race itself. Does the presidential winner have the same party controlling the levers in Congress? It's quite possible they don't. In this unique year, it's possible all three flip: Senate control, House control, and the White House. So that causes some muddiness, but there should be some faith that whoever wins this election gets through January 6th, but perhaps not with some messiness.
Okay, Scott McFarland, you'll be there for every second and step. Thank you so much. And you can watch Election Night with the CBS News team live from our election headquarters here in New York and with our team spread out across the country. Join us for real-time results, analysis, and exclusive polling. Coverage starts at 4 p.m. Eastern on CBS News 24/7 and continues at 7 p.m. Eastern on CBS. Donald Trump's longtime ally and former advisor Steve Bannon was released from prison Tuesday after serving a 4-month sentence for defying a subpoena from the House committee that investigated January 6th. The 70-year-old immediately went back to hosting his far-right podcast Tuesday morning, telling listeners he is focusing on helping Trump win the election. Speaking in Manhattan hours later, Bannon expressed support for the former president and frustration with what he calls a, quote, broken system led by Democrats. He also falsely accused the former Democratic House Speaker of making him a political prisoner.
And Nancy Pelosi thought a federal prison was going to break me. Well, it empowered me. God bless you. It empowered me. I am more empowered today, more focused today, sharper today, in better shape today than I've ever been in my entire life.
Bannon was convicted in 2022 for refusing to testify before Congress over his alleged involvement in trying to overturn the 2020 election. He attempted to delay his sentence while he appeals the conviction, but the Supreme Court denied his bid. The man convicted on federal charges for attacking former House Speaker Nancy Pelosi's husband with a hammer has been sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole in a separate state trial. In October 2022, David DePape broke into the Pelosi San Francisco home. He was caught on police body camera video physically assaulting 82-year-old Paul Pelosi. In a June federal trial, DePape was found guilty of several crimes, including false imprisonment of an elder, aggravated kidnapping, and first-degree burglary. He's already serving 30 years on those charges. DePape will now serve both prison sentences concurrently. Election threats and conspiracy theories are ramping up as we approach November 5th. Up next, I'll be joined by the executive editor of our CBS News Confirmed team to talk about the incidents her team is tracking and how you can identify false claims and disinformation. Plus, Israel moves to ban an agency that provides resources to Palestinians. We have new reporting on what it could mean for the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Come on, Julia. Oh, no. I will if you will. You go, gal. That's right.
Let me see if you can find me.
I want to make sure that my voice is heard, but also that I lift up other voices.
You can't write a better script.
Yeah, boy. It's gonna be a ride.
We'll see you 7 o'clock sharp.
How fast do you think you were going?
195 miles an hour.
This is incredible.
How close did you actually come to being killed?
That close.
Is this brain surgery without a knife?
It is.
What risk do these children pose to Russia?
I'm not sure the world is prepared for this change.
Definitely not.
Who's the best coach in college football today?
Let me see a mirror.
It's time for the CBS News original, 60 Minutes, Sundays on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy.
And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun.
But wait, there's more.
Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
I'm a voracious consumer of information and constantly curious. I want to know the basic facts of every issue and to press into the heart of the matter. Information is the currency of democracy, and that's what we bring to the table every Sunday.
When you need your
your sports news all the time?
We've got breaking news to bring to you.
CBS Sports HQ gives you a snapshot of all the sports that matter to you.
Big news coming out of the NFL. A lot of movement in the rankings this week.
With highlights.
What a finish at the final round of play.
And in-depth analysis.
Can they three-peat? Tony Romo joins the conversation.
What can you say about this game?
When you need your sports in a snap,
we're bringing you that breaking news right here on HQ.
Find it on CBS Sports HQ. Streaming free anywhere you are.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says at least 93 Palestinians are dead or missing following an Israeli strike in northern Gaza Tuesday. The attack targeted a residential building just north of the city of Jabalia. The State Department says the U.S. is, quote, deeply concerned with the high death toll.
This was a horrifying incident with a horrifying result. We have reached out to the government of Israel to ask what happened here. We don't yet know the underlying circumstances.
Also on Tuesday, Lebanon's Iran-backed militant group Hezbollah named its new leader after Hassan Nasrallah was killed in an Israeli airstrike in Beirut last month. Naim Qassem has been deputy chief since 1991 and has long served as Hezbollah's spokesman. CBS News senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams has more from Tel Aviv. Holly?
Gaza's Hamas-run health ministry says that an Israeli strike early this morning hit a 5-story building in Beit Lahia in northern Gaza, where displaced Palestinian families were sheltering. And it says many of those killed were women and children. Israel's military has repeatedly struck buildings for displaced people in Gaza, saying it is carrying out precise strikes targeting militants. Meanwhile, Israel's parliament voted yesterday to bar the United Nations agency that helps Palestinian refugees from operating inside Israel, taking effect in 90 days. That UN agency, known as UNRWA, is the largest provider of aid to Palestinians. Now, Israel is a longtime critic of UNRWA and earlier this year made a series of allegations, including that several of UNRWA's local Palestinian employees were involved in the October 7th attacks here in Israel, which left around 1,200 people dead. As a result, in March, Congress cut all U.S. funding to UNRWA for a year. Following a UN investigation, the agency sacked 9 staff members who it said may have been involved in the October 7th attacks. For context, UNRWA employs around 13,000 people in Gaza. Israel's vote to bar UNRWA from operating in this country from where international aid is delivered to Gaza has been widely criticized by several of Israel's allies. The U.S. says it is, quote, deeply concerned. Back to you.
Holly Williams in Tel Aviv, thank you. Police are still searching for the person suspected of setting ballot drop boxes on fire in Oregon and Washington. The fires happened early Monday morning, destroying hundreds of ballots. It's prompting local election officials to increase security measures around drop boxes. Nicole Skenga has the latest.
The FBI are now scouring for a dark gray Volvo sedan. That's the one seen in surveillance images pulling over at a Dropbox location in Portland, Oregon, moments before it set fire. And in nearby Vancouver, Washington, police extinguished a smoking ballot box in the early hours on Monday after the fire suppression system inside that Dropbox failed. Now, hundreds of ballots have been destroyed, and authorities believe the same person driving that car in Portland is behind it. Now, the suspect is still at large, complicating this investigation. There was no front license plate on the vehicle, and police say the suspect's car had an unreadable rear license plate. But here's what election officials are now saying. All of the damaged ballots in Portland, there were 3 there, were traced back to voters. Their ballots will be counted. In Clark County, that's home of Vancouver, Washington, I spoke with the county auditor who says anyone who dropped a ballot in that smoking drop box after 11 a.m. local Saturday. That's the drop box in Vancouver's Salmon Creek. They can check their ballot status online at votewa.gov. There, they can also submit a request for a new ballot. This as a bulletin published yesterday by the Department of Homeland Security's Office of Intelligence and Analysis is warning that some are calling for violence in online forums associated with domestic violent extremists connected to election fraud narratives. Now, those threats, according to DHS, are primarily targeting election officials or voting infrastructure, and analysts there now warning law enforcement that some of these individuals online are also calling for the sabotage of ballot drop boxes, circulating their methods on these online forums. Police say they have stepped up patrols around these ballot boxes in Washington and Oregon. And in Clark County, local officials have even assigned ballot box observers to watch that county's 23 ballot drop boxes around the clock, 24/7, up until Election Day. Lindsay?
Nicole Skanga, thank you. For more on this, Rona Taran joins me now. She's the executive editor of CBS News Confirmed. Rona, how worried should we be about this and the general threat to election infrastructure?
Well, leading up to this election, we knew that ballot drop boxes were going to be a target. Now, these have been two isolated incidents, but there were warnings in advance. Now, what we know, this also happened in 2020. There were two instances in 2020 in which ballot drop boxes were set on fire. They also became a target of misinformation in 2020, people falsely saying that they were being used for voter fraud. So what's important to remember here is that, yes, these may happen, there may be instances of it, but what people are attempting to do, yes, number one, they may be attempting to destroy ballots, but they're also seeking to sow distrust about the system. Now, what people have to remember is that, you know, when these instances do happen, there is a process in place whereby people can actually cast their ballots afterwards.
As Nicole was just saying, and to check and see if your ballot was affected. So 1 week to Election Day, can you please update us on incidents of election fraud, anything your team is monitoring that has happened?
Well, one that's getting a lot of attention online today is a post from former President Donald Trump. Now, he is pointing to an incident in Lancaster County, Pennsylvania. He said they've been caught with 2,600 fraudulent ballots and forms that were all filled out by one person. Now, this actually is false, but it does point to something that's actually happening in Lancaster County. Officials there last week said they have launched a review into around 2,500 voter registration applications that they received right before the deadline. And they said that there was some evidence that there may have been fraud in this. Now, there's a few things to remember here. Number one, that these are not ballots, they're voter registration applications. And number two, we don't know how many of that 2,500 were fraudulent. The investigation is ongoing. Now, Trump called for law enforcement to get involved. They already are. So much like the drop boxes, there is a process in place for these things when they do happen. And it actually points to the fact that the system is working. So oftentimes, particularly over the next week, people just need to be conscious that, you know, people will point to things, maybe take it out of context or say that it shows evidence of widespread fraud. Now, we know from election officials, audits, court cases, independent research, that their voter fraud is exceedingly rare and definitely not anything that can swing an election.
I mean, to your point, we're going to be getting a lot coming at us in the next week or so. So what can people do this week and beyond to be cognizant of when they read these claims or if they hear politicians repeating them?
So one other thing I'll point to that's getting a lot of traction online today, and I think it illustrates a broader point. Sometimes online you can see these broad figures and they look like really, you know, they look like sort of suspicious. So, for example, there's a claim online today that Michigan has more registered voters than people who are actually registered to vote. So these figures are they have more than 8 million registered voters, but only 7.9 million who are actually eligible to vote. Now, if you hear that, you might think that's actually quite suspicious. This has been kind of going viral online over the last week. It's been boosted by Elon Musk. Now, let's dig into those figures a little. If you actually look at them, that figure of over 8 million contains both active voters and inactive voters. Now, that might be somebody who, for example, has moved out of Michigan and they're no longer voting in the state. Now, federal law requires that they stay on the voter rolls for a period of time. So if you actually dig into it, it's only 7.2 active million voters. So people just need to be aware sometimes these will be presented in like a meme format or a tweet format or, you know, a simple Facebook post. It looks like clear evidence of voter fraud and people will point to this. What people need to remember is do your research and sort of do your own investigation into it. And oftentimes it's a little bit more nuanced.
We always appreciate you doing the research for us as well. Rona Tarrant, thank you. McDonald's third quarter earnings beat Wall Street's expectations Tuesday. However, investors have become bearish on the restaurant's declining same-store sales. Now, McDonald's sales throughout the globe fell 1.5% in its third quarter compared to the second, and come amid the E. coli outbreak related to McDonald's Quarter Pounders. This sent shares of the Golden Arches down, but only by less than 1% at market close Tuesday. CFO Ian Borden said the decline was related to the outbreak, but that it is, quote, behind us. As of the last CDC update, the E. coli outbreak has killed 1 person, left 22 hospitalized, and sickened at least 75 people across 13 states. A 15-year-old girl in Colorado is one of those who is ill, and according to a new lawsuit filed against McDonald's, the teen was left with food poisoning and is experiencing kidney failure after eating Quarter Pounders at least twice in the last month. The Labor Department says that job openings last month hit their lowest level since January 2021. In September, the number of job openings dropped to 7.4 million. That's down from nearly 8 million openings in August. The numbers indicate the labor market is still cooling off ahead of the Federal Reserve's interest rate decision next week. On Friday, the Labor Department will put out its October jobs report, and economists are predicting that 120,000 jobs will be added to the economy, and the unemployment rate will likely stay at a low of 4.1%. Battleground states will play a big role in determining who ends up winning the presidency, and one of those states is North Carolina. Our executive director of elections and surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins me in studio next to tell us what he's watching for in the state in the final stretch. You're streaming The Daily Report.
An original documentary from CBS reports.
It was genocide, a deliberate effort by the United States government to eliminate the food source that was relied upon by Native American tribes.
American bison were slaughtered and Native Americans displaced.
And that's how tribes were subjugated to reservations and our lands were taken.
But now, through conservation efforts at Yellowstone,
Buffalo provided everything that we needed. Now they need help.
a herd grows.
We need to step up and help them.
And a culture is reborn.
When the buffalo return and come back, that's when our tribe will begin to heal.
Yellowstone Bison Revival, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Oh, wow. Look at this.
Let 60 Minutes take you on a private tour of the National Archives.
So there may be treasures like this buried in boxes.
Historical secrets from America's past.
So this is original from 1778?
This case.
It's like a screenplay, something straight out of Hollywood.
But it's not fiction. It's 48 hours.
Human remains found this week.
4 families shattered.
There's no physical evidence.
The mystery would haunt investigators for years.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Like a John Grisham novel.
A gripping true crime original. 48 hours. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places. Bright, shiny faces.
Nate has one of the quickest minds I've ever seen.
Put me in the game, coach.
Tony has a way of making people feel comfortable.
The best interviews feel like it's just a conversation with a neighbor.
Hey.
Gail has this unbelievable knack to ask a question that is the question that you're asking at home.
I've been told I could talk to a tree, and that's pretty much true.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my 2 good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
I'll see you in the morning.
Listening to how someone explains themselves is so key to understanding their perspective.
The grief of losing a child is immense. You can't breathe.
After decades of the war on drugs, things have only gotten worse.
Every shipment of fentanyl is a ticking time bomb.
50 times more powerful than heroin.
CBS Reports goes deep into Mexico.
What is your role in the Sinaloa cartel?
To find out why the cartels keep getting stronger and wealthier.
This is a war, but we're not fighting it. Our citizens are dying.
funding cartels. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Welcome back to the Daily Report. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Here are some additions to our top stories. Russia released video Tuesday of a training exercise simulating a, quote, massive nuclear strike in the event of an enemy striking first. The Kremlin says the drill involved ballistic and cruise missiles, and they all hit their targets. The drill comes at a critical point in Russia's Ukraine invasion, with allied North Korean troops reportedly preparing to fight. President Biden was in Baltimore Tuesday to announce a new $3 billion investment to upgrade ports across the U.S. The planned upgrades include changes to make port cargo operations more eco-friendly. The goal is to eliminate more than 3 million metric tons of carbon pollution over the next decade. A federal judge has dismissed a legal challenge seeking to stiffen ID requirements for Pennsylvania residents voting from overseas. The judge said the group of House Republicans from the state had waited too long to file their case and lacked standing. The lawsuit was filed in late September after more than 25,000 overseas ballots had already been sent out. With 1 week until Election Day, both presidential candidates are appealing to voters in crucial battleground states. North Carolina is one of those key states, with 16 electoral votes up for grabs. Early voting in the Tar Heel state began October 11th by mail and October 17th in person. CBS News Executive Director of Elections and Surveys, Anthony Salvanto, joins us now to dive deeper into the state. So, Anthony, good to see you. How are voting regions split up in North Carolina, and which way are they trending?
Yep. So as we get closer to Election Day, I want to break down every state. This is an example in North Carolina of why I always call them battleground states, but not swing states. You hear that term a lot because North Carolina hasn't actually swung of late. Barack Obama won it in 2008, but then it has been Republican. I'm going to pull out the 2020 election because it's always been just a little bit out of reach for Democrats. So can they swing it now is a big question. This is how you watch it. Now, I'm going to start with that 2020 vote. There are a couple of areas in North Carolina. Start with the Raleigh-Durham area. You see these areas in blue here? They cast a lot of Democratic votes. Like in a lot of places, you see Democrats try to kind of run up the score in more urban or cities. Also in Charlotte, same thing. But one thing to watch on election night is that unlike a lot of cities, let's say we'll talk about Philadelphia and its environs, but around Charlotte here, these suburbs are all red. Those suburbs are a lot more trending Republican. You know, if the Democrats going to cut into those margins there, that's one of the things that we're going to be looking for. And then number two, just to sort of illustrate that point about where the vote comes from, I'm going to take the state map. I'm going to kind of turn it on its side. And the higher bars here is where more vote comes from. And that's what I'm talking about Democrats needing a lot of turnout in Raleigh, a lot of turnout there in Charlotte, and even in Asheville, too. Obviously, you've got a lot of area in here tragically affected by the hurricane. So we'll see what happens there. A lot of red counties as well. But that's how you sort of look at it from a turnout perspective, Lindsay.
I love what you just did. I think that is so cool. It is so visually easy for me to understand. Right. Let's talk about hurricane recovery efforts, though. Yeah. How are those efforts impacting not only the early vote we've already seen, but potentially the amount of turnout we could see on November 5th? So
one thing that you look at is in this portion of the state that we're talking about here, all these red counties that you see here, that adds to the Republican margin. In fact, on average, Republicans will get like 60% of the vote there. But to come back to the point about Asheville in particular, to use the 2020 vote as an example, you know, Joe Biden got a 30,000 vote lead just out of that county. And if the Democrats are going to win this, they're going to need to build leads like that. So it could have an impact. We'll have to see. Again, at the same time, you've got a lot of Republican votes here that they're also going to need. And so we'll keep an eye on that. And then the rest of the state, like I said, suburbs versus cities, which is kind of a common theme, especially, last point to add, this part of the Sun Belt, fast growing, diversifying, very different overall theme there than those upper Midwest states, slower growing or losing population like Michigan, Wisconsin, or Pennsylvania. Different tale.
Anthony Salvanto, looking forward to seeing a lot more of you from now until Election Day. Thank you. Vice President Kamala Harris is struggling to gain the support from some Arab American voters in the battleground state of Michigan. Many have expressed frustration over how the Biden administration has handled the war in Gaza. Our Ed O'Keefe spoke with members of the Arab and Muslim community there.
Here in Michigan and across the country, concerns with the economy, inflation, access to abortion rights, and the future of democracy, obviously top of mind concerns. But in this state, there's a specific group of people concerned about a far more urgent life or death issue, the war in the Middle East. There are hundreds of thousands of Arab or Muslim American voters in this state who live mostly in and around Dearborn and Detroit. And we spent some time with some of them recently who are quite upset about what's going on in the Middle East, quite upset with Vice President Harris for her support of Israel, and personally affected by the violence. Take a listen. Who here knows someone who has been killed in the last year in Gaza or Lebanon? And who here has a neighbor or friend who's had relatives killed in Gaza or Lebanon?
I don't think people understand how dehumanizing and demoralizing this experience has been for us, and that we're expected to be these upstanding, healthy, productive members of the society, which we are gladly. But you can't expect us to continue down that trajectory and expect us to be healthy, functioning members of this country while you utilize our tax dollars to destabilize our homelands and murder our family members. And I don't think that people understand how much that greatly affects the way that we vote.
Have any of you been contacted by her campaign, either with a text or a door knock or an email?
Every 15 minutes.
Do you text back stop?
No, I don't text back stop. I just ask them, can you please clarify Kamala Harris's, every single text I get, I reply with, can you please clarify Kamala Harris's stance on the genocide taking place in the Middle East? I don't get a reply back, but that's my reply to every single text I get.
How about you?
No, I've not received anything.
How about you? You must.
Yeah, I've received text as well, and I always respond, and like I was saying, I never get a response.
Of those 4 voters we spoke to, they told us they voted for President Biden 4 years ago. None of them is planning to vote for Vice President Harris because they say her support for this war, for genocide, is reason enough to not support her. The Harris campaign knows they have a real political problem here, quite a cute one, in a community where a few 100,000 votes helped President Biden win 4 years ago, and there are hundreds of thousands of votes potentially being withheld or being cast for a third-party candidate. We spoke with a Harris campaign surrogate here in the Dearborn and Detroit area who shared how it is he's trying to convince them to vote otherwise.
I was one of the uncommitted for Joe Biden. And the minute they made the transition, when Joe Biden stepped down and Kamala Harris stepped up, I pivoted and I put my support behind Kamala Harris. That was a pivotal moment because we're going to have a different president come January. And it's not going to be Joe Biden, and it could be Donald Trump again, or it could be a new president in Kamala Harris. And I believe that this was a pivotal moment to shift. It's a new opportunity to give us hope for something different than what we're dealing with right now. And yes, it was a critical moment, and that's why I put my full support behind Kamala Harris.
So while there's a lot of focus here in Michigan on the economy, inflation, access to abortion, and other top-of-mind concerns, a reminder that there is a very specific group of people here quite concerned with what's going on with the war in the Middle East, and for them, it's been a matter of life or death, and a big reason why they won't be voting for Vice President Harris. Lindsay?
Ed O'Keefe, thank you. A New Jersey-based medical supply company has expanded a recall on its baby powder due to a possible asbestos contamination. The recall surrounds Dynacare baby powders produced by Dynarex. The company says 35 states are affected, up from 12. The Federal Drug Administration discovered the potential contamination in a routine sampling test. So far, no illnesses have been reported. Dynarex says anyone who has purchased a recalled product can return it for a full refund. Parts of the central U.S. were under red flag warnings Tuesday as a cold front is raising the risk of wildfires throughout the Great Plains. The drought-stricken region is facing record warmth, low humidity, and strong winds ideal conditions to trigger wildfires. The Weather Prediction Center forecasted afternoon highs will reach the 70s and 80s from northern Texas to Wisconsin. That's about 20 to 25 degrees above average for this time of year. As the week progresses, this record dry heat is expected to expand into the Northeast.
Terry Garr as Inga.
Would you like to have a roll in the hay? Roll in the hay.
That was actress Terry Garr in the 1974 film Young Frankenstein. Garr passed away Tuesday of multiple sclerosis, according to her publicist. She was known for her comedic roles in films like the aforementioned Young Frankenstein and Tootsie, and was a frequent guest on Late Night with David Letterman. The talk show host would later credit Garr's early appearances with helping make the show a success. Garr was diagnosed with the autoimmune disease in 1999. She was 79 years old. Still to come, our Ramy Inocencio takes a look at a movement to get Palestinians out of Gaza. His report ahead. You're streaming The Daily Report.
Washington is the seat of power. National security, foreign policy, global economics, every story comes through Washington in some way. We bring some of the most powerful voices in America to the table. We don't just ask the questions, you have to go deeper. We try to understand what's at the heart of the issue we're talking about, to then come forward with solutions.
Face the Nation on CBS.
The justices ruled that Harvard and the University of North Carolina violated the Constitution.
In the aftermath of the Supreme Court decision to end affirmative action in college admissions, uncertainty sets in for some students of color.
Affirmative action really gave us an equal opportunity.
CBS Reports explores the historic decision and what it means for those chasing an opportunity to change their lives.
I knew that college was the ticket to break this cycle.
The end of affirmative action, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail. What do you say to those in your party?
Any cracks in the Republican Party? Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage. I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded one-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
AI is among the most world-changing technologies ever.
Curing diseases, scientific breakthroughs, making lives better.
They can help us with medical discoveries, scientific discoveries, doing better agriculture, having cures for things like Alzheimer's.
It's also going to really transform the way we work.
The uplifting potential of artificial intelligence is limitless.
It gives you a friend, somebody to chat with 24/7. That is non-judgmental. He makes me feel loved and desired.
And so are its downfalls.
The problem with all this AI is that it's unpredictable and uncontrollable. The choices we make now will have lasting effects for decades, maybe even centuries.
The ChatGPT revolution, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
We are about to see American weapons in the hands of Mexican cartels.
A gun pipeline to Mexico.
We are arming the cartels.
100%, no doubt about it.
Happening right under our noses.
Who's doing something about this? Nobody.
A CBS Reports exclusive.
Most Americans have no idea that we are effectively arming the enemy next door.
This is the story the American people need to know.
Arming cartels, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Local officials in Ukraine's second largest city, Kharkiv, say at least 4 people were killed in a Russian bombing Tuesday. As you can see here, the explosion completely devastated a residential neighborhood. The attack happened just hours after another Russian-guided bomb struck a historic building in Kharkiv Monday night. 6 people were injured in that attack. The bombings in Kharkiv are just the latest in a series of Russian strikes on the country. Attacks were also reported in the capital, Kyiv, and in the southern city of Kherson Tuesday. Following Hamas's October 7th attack on Israel, a far-right Israeli settler movement began advancing efforts to drive Palestinians out of Gaza, even if it violates international law. CBS News foreign correspondent Ramy Inocencio spoke with members of that movement, and we want to warn you, some of the images in his report may be disturbing.
As musicians and organizers warmed up, Israeli families who traveled from across the country lazed and laughed in the desert sun, with fairground candy and a marionette show, as seemingly innocuous banners signaled a controversial cause.
We're just a couple miles away from the Gaza Strip, which is west of us that way. This right here behind me is a gathering of far-right Israeli groups that have the mission of resettling Gaza, and they believe that that possibility is getting closer every day after the events of October 7th.
That is illegal under international law. But the mission of this far-right fringe is gaining traction. After Hamas killed about 1,200 Israelis in the worst terror attack on Israeli soil.
The Gaza population lost its right to be in Gaza on the 7th of October.
Daniela Weiss is beloved by her followers as the strident godmother of Israel's settler movement. This zealous crowd doesn't need convincing, like Ranit Bonomo, a grandmother to 40.
Help me understand the foundation of the belief.
The most basic reason is that it's God-given.
International law, modern-day international law.
Yes.
Contravenes that.
If it belongs, something that belongs to us is not illegal.
And this deep religious conviction drives unity. Many here traveled with their family from the occupied West Bank, like Aharon Gottlieb.
Would you be one of the first to go into Gaza to settle?
Of course. I'm waiting.
You're waiting?
I'm waiting.
Born in New York, he and his family moved to Israel when he was 9 and became settlers.
Do you personally want all Palestinians to be forced from Gaza?
Again, I have nothing against a person who's innocent. I just don't believe there are innocent people there.
That would amount to ethnic cleansing in a war that's already killed over 40,000 Palestinians, according to the Hamas-run Palestinian Health Ministry. Most of Gaza's 2.3 million people have been internally displaced. Survivors could be internationally displaced if the settler movement succeeds.
Where would they go?
I think there are many, many European countries who would be happy to accept them.
The world is very, very large. They can fit them in. There's not that many of them.
Settlement of Gaza would likely follow the West Bank playbook. Often young, fervent Israelis harassing and killing Palestinians for their land. Since the 1990s, the number of West Bank settlers has nearly tripled to about 700,000, says the UN. Last year, this group of young, militarized settlers was willing to speak with us in a rare interaction as we stood overlooking the Jordan Valley.
This our lands.
They were unashamed to say what Palestinians should do.
The easy solution if they leave. It makes our life very easy.
Encourage Gazans to leave Gaza. The message from Israel's National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir at this week's rally. Settlers have been emboldened from within the far-right government itself to try to turn back time. Before 2005, the year Israel's military pulled out of Gaza, pulling with them thousands of settlers and dismantling their settlements. Some are sentimental.
We used to spend the week there, and it was just so beautiful. And we used to pass all the little Arab villages along the way, and it's a very, very good memory for me. Yes, and I would like to go back there.
But outside the rally, anti-settlement and anti-government protesters condemn their ambitions.
This is a horrible plan. It's so unmoral. It's terrible.
And polls over the past year found a majority of Israelis do not support resettlement of Gaza. In January, one poll found 38% supported it. In April, a separate poll found only 19% support. And Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who relies on support from the far right, has publicly rejected the idea of Jewish resettlement in Gaza, saying, "No, I don't think that's a realistic goal." Settlers are unswayed.
The Jews have always been, and for better or for worse, will always be here.
Do you think you will see this in your lifetime?
Yes, I do. Definitely. I believe in what I'm doing, and I believe that I'm part of history.
A history that a small but growing number of Israelis pray for, but the vast majority pray to never be revisited again. Ramy Inocencio, CBS News at the Israel-Gaza border.
We are going to take a quick break. You're streaming CBS News 24/7.
Go to the ends of the earth.
Right now.
We got something crazy. And reach for the stars.
Here we are.
Time.
Yes, it's my comeback.
Hey, this is pretty fun. But wait, there's more. Experience thought-provoking,
Welcome to the idea of being a human being.
innovative, and truly original reporting.
Look through a telescope and go, wow.
Because there's always something new under the sun on CBS Sunday morning.
At this moment, terrorists could be plotting another attack.
9/11 triggered a counter-terrorist system that included a secret database.
This person needs a closer look.
A growing list of nearly 2 million people, including some Americans who say they're innocent.
For 1 hour flight, I have to spend 6 hours to go and come back.
CBS Reports explores the system, the people responsible for it, and those pushing for change.
I'm not fighting against them. I'm fighting for them to do the right thing.
The Watch List, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Don't miss true crime anytime you want, anywhere you go. With the 48 Hours podcast. Real crimes, real lives, real justice.
There's some questions that have to be asked and need to be answered.
Listen to 48 Hours on Apple Podcasts.
An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Imagine yourself in Manhattan with no police, no army, no mayor.
The people of Haiti stare down poverty, corruption, natural disasters, and violence.
90% of the guns that are used by gangs in Haiti are American guns.
But with an unbreakable spirit and eternal optimism.
There are days where I cry, but we can't be discouraged. We still believe in Haiti.
They're still able to look ahead with hope.
Haiti is on the brink of transformation, a radical shift. Nations are coming together and saying things must change.
Fighting for Haiti, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
Hey there, welcome to The Uplift.
I thought she was a groom, and I stepped back and I went, oh, you're the queen. She's going to be with me every instant that I'm alive.
I just wanted to see if you'd go to Disneyland with me today.
I look over at him and he's smiling.
I'm going to remember that the rest of my life.
They told us when he was going to be born, he was only going to live for 30 minutes. It's really a miracle that he's with us today.
The Uplift. Stream now on the free CBS News app.
When you wake up in the morning, we want to be your go-to team.
On our places, bright shiny faces.
I don't go to work in the morning. I go for coffee with my two good friends, and we talk about the world.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings.
A CBS News investigation. People looking for love, finding their life savings gone.
This could happen to anybody.
And sometimes losing their lives. Anything for love. Now streaming on the free CBS News app.
A new report says many phone companies aren't doing enough to protect people from robocalls and texts. CBS News correspondent Nancy Chen has more.
How about this? Your phone rings and it's a text or a call from a number that you don't recognize. Sound familiar? Experts say far too often these texts and calls are coming from scammers trying to steal your money. To make it worse, the report's author says many phone companies aren't doing enough to stop it. That includes implementing technology to prevent robo and spoof calls as mandated by the FCC. While nearly 4,000 phone companies have installed anti-robocall technology in the last 3 years, the report says only 47% of them have fully completed these measures. We reached out to the FCC, which says it's incorrect to state most providers are not complying. Many are asking for extensions, and some say they're unable to apply the blocking technology in rural areas with older infrastructure. Now, while scam calls have slightly decreased since this law took effect, the report says robo and scam texts have nearly tripled this year to 19 billion a month. The FCC only adopted its first rules focused on scam texting last year. The report's author says text can actually be more dangerous than calls, in part because it's much easier to tap on a malicious link in a text that can expose your data in seconds. Nancy Chen, CBS News, New York.
It's now easier for air travelers to get refunds for a delayed or canceled flight. Under this week's new regulations from the Transportation Department, travelers will be eligible for an automatic refund for flights that are canceled or delayed by 3 hours domestically and 6 hours internationally. Flyers waiting for their luggage for 12 hours or more on domestic flights and at least 15 hours on some international flights also qualify for bag fee refunds. Well, NASA is over the moon about the number of landing options for the 2026 Artemis 3 mission. The agency has released a list of 9 potential sites for the first moon landing in more than 50 years. As you can see, they all fall near the lunar South Pole, where astronauts intend to explore uncharted and permanently shadowed areas of the moon. Scientists say these areas could potentially contain water and other compounds. NASA says the factors that go into deciding the 2026 moon landing site include scientific potential, lighting conditions, and communication capabilities with Earth. Move over, Moondang. Another pygmy hippo is making a splash at a zoo in Germany. Tony made her public debut in Berlin Tuesday with her first underwater movements, and the zoo's director says this is a big deal because pygmy hippos usually don't swim underwater, they run. Tony was born in the zoo, in June. She is named after German soccer star Antonio Rudiger, who is the hippo's honorary sponsor. The TDR team very excited about that. Here's a look at some of the stories we're covering in our next hour. We're officially 1 week out from Election Day, with both candidates trying to make a strong final statement to remaining voters. We'll dive into their campaign strategies in the home stretch. Plus, millions of Americans are already casting their ballots. We're taking a closer look at election threats as the race comes to a close. And Hezbollah names a new leader as Israel launches another deadly strike in Gaza. We'll have a look at the state of the conflict in the Middle East. You're streaming CBS News.
Okay, so let's just start at the beginning.
Well, let me start with this. What is at stake here?
What is the answer then?
Do you know why?
You want me to just keep going?
Is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Were there death threats?
How is this possible?
What's wrong with that argument?
Are you saying they lied?
Have you told the government that?
Why won't you say the word crisis?
You're not answering my question.
This really
Is that scary?
Does that make sense?
What do you mean? What does that mean in
Did any of that make sense?
What's your response?
What happened?
Why?
It's time for the CBS News Original 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS and streaming on Paramount+.
There is no more room in our city.
New York City is receiving record numbers of migrants.
Today, we're going to have more than 500 adults and children come through that door.
Tensions rise as shelters reach max capacity.
We don't have to take care of them.
CBS Reports goes inside a crisis cities and families are facing as they fight to survive.
The United States still has that glimmer of hope for people to come here.
Fighting for a future. Now streaming on the free CBS News app. An original documentary from CBS Reports.
Since you started La Soup in 2014, do you have any sense as to how much food you've rescued from the landfill?
We've rescued 4.5 million pounds.
I can't even fathom how much food that is.
And that's one little person in one little city in America. We're going to call this chicken piccata. We did 450 of these meals today.
This is the exact dish you and I are going to have.
Yep.
Oh, really good.
Is it good?
Mm-hmm.
Having a plan of how to keep people fed should be in every single city.
If we eliminated food waste, could we eliminate
hunger? Yes.
Eating Trash, now streaming on the free CBS News app.
America Decides is your place for fact-based, unbiased reporting.
At the White House, at the Capitol, on the campaign trail.
What do you say to those in your party? Any cracks in the Republican Party?
Our reporters and our anchors travel the country talking to voters like you
about the issues that matter most.
Immigration is really a factor right now
that are going to be driving your decisions.
What would you say to those who say, look, that's just democracy at work?
Listening to you and bringing your voice into our coverage.
I want a strong, proud America.
Is democracy on the ballot in 2024?
Let us help you decide.
America Decides on CBS News 24/7.
Stream our expanded 1-hour program Monday through Thursday at 5 p.m. Eastern.
When people say who's first to get in the morning, that would be me.
Morning news matters because it sets the tone for your day, and it's a way of getting you started.
Day to day, that first draft of history, it happens right here.
We're going to uplift you. We're going to send you out your way.
We take you places, we teach you new things, and we make you feel like, you know, it's not all bad.
People say to me, you always seem to be having a good time. And you know what? You're right.
Your morning routine just got better. CBS Mornings, weekdays at 7.
CBS News, 60 Minutes, Sunday on CBS.
Superstar approaching, superstar approaching.
Just get your popcorn and get ready.
Come on, Julia.
Oh, no.
I will if you will.
You go, gal.
Yeah.
Welcome to the Daily Report on October 29, 2024. I'm Lindsay Reiser. Tonight, 1 week out from Election Day, the presidential candidates make their final campaign pushes out on the trail. Donald Trump defends his New York City rally as he campaigns in battleground Pennsylvania. And Vice President Kamala Harris prepares to deliver her closing argument in Washington, at the same spot where her opponent whipped up his supporters ahead of the attacks on the Capitol January 6,